While working on my How Far Would Homura Come in ReZero video, I found myself thinking more deeply about Homura's character and the 7 deadly sins in ReZero. That led me down an unexpected but fascinating rabbit hole where I asked myself which of the 7 deadly sins would best represent each Puella Magia from the original 5 Madoka Magica magical girls. So let's begin with the first character, this being the main character, Madoka Kaname herself. She represents the sin of sloth. The definition of sloth meaning is laziness or failure to act and utilize one's talent. Madoka begins the series as emotionally passive. She avoids making decisions, delaying taking action, and second-guessing herself at every step. This is of course understandable considering the trauma she experienced in episode 3, seeing Mami Tomoe get eaten by Charlotte, which completely traumatized the poor girl and made her second-guess herself of even wanting to becoming a magical girl. This second-guessing of wanting to be a magical girl reinforced after learning more and more about magical girls and how witches are born. While she ultimately evolves into a transcending figure, her early characterization reflects the essence of sloth in its spiritual and psychological dimension. Next, we have Sayaka Miki, who represents the sin of envy, which is by the definition jealousies of another trait, status, or relationship, often with the desire to deprive them of it. Sayaka's story is literally driven by her own enviness, especially towards Kyosuke's romantic interest in another girl, which was one of her best friends, Hitomi. By the way, Hitomi did nothing wrong, and I die on that hill. Anyways, this destructive envy towards Kyosuke's and Hitomi's happiness eats away at her, both mentally and physically, ultimately consuming her as she descends into despair and eventually turns into a witch. Next, we got my goat, Mami Tomoe, who most likely represents the sin of pride, which is an inflated sense of self-worth in oneself or in one's accomplishments and puts oneself above others. Now, this is actually against my normal description about Mami Tomoe, since she has such a low opinion of herself. However, she has a high opinion about her skills as a magical girl and is quite prideful of that. While she is not completely arrogant, she exhibits a quiet pride in her strength, experience, and moral conviction, as well as her looks. She sees herself as a protector and role model, an image she created herself to be liked by others, and an image she needs to believe to stay sane and not become suicidal. However, this self-image blinds her to real danger. This can be seen in both episode 2 and episode 3, where she tried everything in her power to flex in front of her pupils how amazing she is, which resulted into her almost dying in episode 2 and actually dying in episode 3, since her pride, especially her desire to appear composed and capable in front of Madoka and Sayaka, contributes to her tragic downfall when she underestimates the witch Charlotte. Next we got Kyoko Sakura, who embodies the sin of gluttony, which is by the definition the sin of which is overindulgence or overconsumption of typical food or drink. Kyoko is closely associated with food, since she is always snacking or eating throughout the series, but her gluttony extends beyond food. After the loss of her family due to her highly religious father, she overindulges in selfish survivalist lifestyle, shutting herself off emotionally and only caring for herself. Her gluttony is a defense mechanism, a way to cope with guilt, loss, vulnerability. And finally, we got your favorite magical girl, Homura Akemi, who, in my opinion, perfectly represents the sin of lust, which is an overwhelming desire often associated with physical or emotional obsession. Homura's devotion to Madoka borders an obsessive love towards Madoka. Her every action across countless time loops is driven by a singular desire to protect and be with Madoka. While not necessarily romantic or sexual in a traditional sense, her fixation aligns with the broader definition of lust as an all-consuming, disordered desire to be with Madoka. Her descent into darkness by becoming the devil and by literally stealing Madoka's godlike ability in rebellion further emphasizes how overwhelming and dangerous this obsession became, especially considering that some side story even hint at the fact that Homura would groom Madoka's younger brother into becoming Madoka's replacement. So, these were the 5 magical girls from the original Madoka Magica universe. If you like the series and want me to cover even more magical girls and more side characters in Madoka Magica, please write it down in the comments and I will make a second part. Also, who do you think would represent what sin in Madoka Magica? Write it down in the comments. Goodbye for now.